one of my concerning trends in the first half is sort of like, I feel like OG Anunoby is hitting a bit of a wall, maybe in terms of, or maybe even hitting a bit of a ceiling in terms of his development. I think coming into the year, there was, out of the hype for everybody, right? There was hype for Scotty because there's just an excitement for the number 4 overall pick. I think he's exceeded that hype, right? Especially from the get-go, he was like really exciting. I think there was hype about Fred stepping into that leadership role, and he's done that, right? But I think more than anyone else, the guy that got the most hype was OG Anunoby. He was a very popular pick for most improved player across the board. And when I look at the season right now, I know he obviously had the hip pointer injury, which knocked him out for about a month, but it hasn't really he hasn't really taken that jump that a lot of people kind of expected him to, right? When you look at, his usage has increased this year, especially at the start of the season, right? But his usage has increased. This is the first time in his career his usage has been over 20%, and usage is just sort of like how many possessions are you using in terms of shots, in terms of free throws, in terms of turnovers and things like that. He's never been more than 20%. Last season was the closest at 19%, and he was good last year, very good last year, and now it's up to 21%. But it's starting to drop here a little bit, and I just think that, like, if you look at his efficiency metrics, right, last season he shot 48% from the field. This year he's at 43.6%. He was shot 40% from the 3 last year. This year he's at 35%. And maybe it's just like a bit of a 3-point shooting blip. Obviously there's some variance there, but it just doesn't feel like OG is like as clear cut as that third guy as maybe people expected him to be coming into the year. If anything, actually, I think almost Gary has sort of jumped into that third option type of role, which makes sense. I think Gary is a very, very polished offensive player, probably more polished than OG, but maybe OG has hit a bit of a ceiling, or at least a little bit of a break in his development. Maybe that's what I wanted to ask you is, do you feel like he's sort of hitting a ceiling, or do you feel like he's sort of just like the circumstances of the season, sort of the injuries and things like that, this is just more of a blip and that he will continue to rise in his career?
I would say, the ceiling I envisioned for him before the season began is different than the ceiling I view for him now. But I will say the development is tracking the right way. And so we are seeing struggles, but I think we need to see these struggles. We need to see those reps where, he's taking those threes off the dribble, where he's in the mid-range and he's trying to, create a shot for himself. Those are important aspects for him to develop. And so this might be a season where he's figuring it out. And so we should see him be a better player next season, but you don't become that player without getting those reps. And so from a development standpoint, I'm happy with where things are at. The one thing I do look at with OG is, he had a huge opportunity coming into this season where without Pascal Siakam, he could have taken over the reins. He had that big game in New York. We remember that one. But I think by and large, he's been fine with being the fourth option. I think you're right to say that Gary has emerged into that a third option. And I think, if he was a bit more assertive at certain points in the season, once you take that spot, it's yours to lose. Like, look at Fred VanVleet over the years, right? He at a certain point, he could have just been like, okay, yeah, this is a nice role. I'm a sixth man. I'm doing this. It's fine. I'm playing off Kyle Lowry. I can do catch and shoots. This is it. That's fine. But he's come for more and more and more. And now this is his role on the team as an all-star, right? And so at a certain point, OG Anunoby has got to reach that phase where it's like, no, this is the player I want to be. Everyone get out the way.
Right. And, I think in particular what you mentioned in terms of like, him trying to do the harder things, I think that might be more of the blip that we're seeing rather than necessarily like he's just sort of fallen off a little bit as a player. Because I don't think that's the case whatsoever. Like, I think if you put OG in that 3-and-D role, he can thrive. He will give you 15 points on 60% true shooting. He will have lockdown defense pretty much across the board, no matter what position he's guarding. Like, all that is still there for him, but I think he has that ambition to like get to another level beyond that, right? And I think that's where it's going to be hard. And the biggest thing for me is actually just looking at his numbers. Last season, he took 1.6 pull-up jumpers per game. This is from 2 or 3, right? He shot it at a 32% effective field goal, which is not good. Let's be real. It's not good.
Yeah.
This season, he's clearly trying to do more of that. He's gone from 1.6 pull-up jumpers per game to 4.1 pull-up jumpers per game. That's a 3 times increase. And when you look at it, his effective field goal percentage is still 35%. That's where, to me, I'm like, he either masters that or he doesn't. And really, that's sort of the make or break aspect to his game, right? Because if he wants to take that next level to be that kind of like star level wing who can create, who can get his own shot, and we see him do it all the time. Like he actually does hit a decent share of like step back jumpers. You know, there's that one against DeMar in overtime. You'll see that little buzzer beater, the one where he crossed up the Plumlee, Mason Plumlee, I think. And step back and against Charlotte, like he can make that move. It's just he hasn't mastered it yet, although he is trying to do more of it, and I guess he'll either continue to master it or he won't. Let's go to our second most promising trends of the first half. For me, the second most promising trend is Gary scoring. Let's be real here. This guy had 6 straight games of 30 plus points in scoring. If you look at just like the thing is, he's really been impressive in the consistency of his scoring. For a guy who shoots a lot of jumpers, and we know that kind of comes up and down, he's a very consistent scorer because the games that he's sort of down almost always coincide with the fact that he's coming back from injury or an absence or something like that, right?
Right.
Like he has this trend where he comes off of injury, he's like, not really in a rhythm for like 2 or 3 games. But then after that, he's just been consistently giving teams buckets. He is an incredible 3-point shooter. We see the ability to generate his own threes is really impressive because he's able to either, coming off a screen or just like one-on-one step back scenarios. He has that on lock. He has the mid-range game too. But I think Gary has exceeded all expectations. And as we mentioned earlier, I think he has jumped into that third scorer role, and he's been really, really good in that role. And I think we knew that this was a possibility, but this is like an upper end of that possibility coming into the season. He's been just a success across the board, really. There's nothing really bad to say about anything Gary's done all season.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed watching him play this season on the offensive end because of how well he's fit in, right? And I think one of the things Nick Nurse talked about before the season was, hey, can he fit into the offense a bit better and not, sort of do his own thing, and then the Raptors offense exists outside of that. And I think the only times he's actually gone to that is when the team has needed it, so where they're in a lull and they haven't scored for 3-4 possessions down the floor, and it's like, hey, Gary, we need you to get us something. And I think he's been really good in recognizing those moments. And then outside of that, he's functioning off catch and shoots provided by Fred, provided by Pascal, and that's exactly what you want to see. So offensively, I think it's been a huge bonus. And the big thing is now is like you're adding one more person that has to be taken seriously in the scouting report.
Very seriously.
It can't just be Pascal and Fred that other teams have to worry about. And I even asked, Nuggets coach Michael Malone after that game against Denver, and he said, "Yeah, we know Gary because he was in our division." And we was in those battles between the Portland Trail Blazers and the Denver Nuggets.
That's right. Yeah.
And so he said, we know what Gary's capable of. We game plan for him as well. We know he's an important person to game plan for. And I think that's another thing that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out as more teams come to really, really respect him.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where maybe the assists can come up a little bit because obviously that's the one area of his game where he's not playmaking as much for others. Although really right now, the only role for Gary is to just put the ball in the basket. Last 13 games for Gary Trent Jr., averaging 25 points per game. So pretty good. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does on the second half of the All-Star break.